Hello everyone. Welcome to the Merit Shine channel, and we are looking at an interesting session today. And we are obviously trying to look at the sort of an answer key that is quite possible for the IBPS PO mains exam from a GA, BA, FA, or let's say the general banking and financial awareness perspective. And what are the key themes that basically come out? So first things first. So if you look at the difficulty level, I would probably call this somewhere between moderate and tough. Obviously, अगर आप compare करें vis-a-vis how the SBI PO was versus this exam, obviously this was on the slightly tougher side, no doubt about that. Obviously, news को in depth में cover करने की expectation ज़्यादा थी, wherein if you had read the news in depth and brought in that curiosity question जिसकी मैं हमेशा बात करते रहता हूँ when we talk about the CQ aspect of it, अगर उस पर थोड़ा focus किया होता तो then obviously it would have been a slightly easier way to handle it. But of course, मतलब as it is true with GA, if you know it, it is easy. If you don't know it, it is tough, right? So that's the context overall. Now, from a skewedness perspective, obviously, the questions from a December standpoint obviously were heavier. So, मतलब December का weightage comparatively ज़्यादा था. Obviously, you had questions spread across a few months here and there as well. But majority काफी सारा weightage actually December के लिए भी था. So if you were someone who had been consistently preparing well over a period of time, and you were also looking at in-depth news, you should have probably been able to handle them quite well. But of course इसमें कुछ ऐसे questions भी थे जिसमें मतलब the expectation is that this is something which is more general awareness itself. I mean, you may not have basically come across these things in PDFs, but it is more like अगर आप कोई news cover कर रहे थे तो generally उसमें वो aspects cover हो जाते हैं. So let's say for example question on the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, or you talk about the Lok Sabha sessions, number of sessions कितने हैं and all that. So these kind of questions, it's very difficult to say कि ये question आने वाला है, या for example बीबी का मकबरा also for that matter. So it's very difficult to say that these kind of questions can come. They were definitely present here and there in some news information, and then purely out of curiosity you're going to try and build on that information. That's the whole context, right? And generally अगर आपने news follow किया है, आप papers को track कर रहे थे, newspapers को, तो then in these areas you would have probably been able to cover some of these questions जो explicitly आप पढ़ने नहीं जाओगे. Right. So that's the broad theme, right, which I wanted to discuss with you guys. And let's quickly jump into the questions that I have basically collected. So one quick disclaimer here, of course, the fact is that this is entirely memory based. So obviously this is not questions and answers. So I'm going to talk about certain statements जहाँ से basically आपको वो question का derivation मिल जाएगा कि मतलब वो question का जो answer है वो basically कहाँ से derive हो रहा है. So that is what we will try and cover. Of course, since it's a memory based paper, there would obviously be questions जो मैं बता रहा हूँ which may actually not have been in the paper. At the same time, there could be some questions which I might be missing out as well. So that is definitely a possibility. And of course, there could be some questions wherein our understanding of the question is a little different from what the actual question was. So these things can definitely happen, and that's a disclaimer that I'm stating right at the beginning of this video itself. Now, having said that, let's quickly try and understand what exactly were the questions and the statements which basically can help us derive those answers to those questions as well, right? So I'll move myself out of the screen and we jump right in. Right, so let's start looking at the questions now. To start off with the first one, there was a question on the chairman of the Indian Committee in Space, right? That's the context. Now, obviously, there has been a recent change which could have led to a confusion wherein the ISRO chairman was also changed to Mr. Somanath, but that's not the case here. It was a specifically different question, and the answer in this case was Pawan Kumar Goenka, and this was a question that appeared in September 2021. Moving on to another question. So there was another one pertaining to the Tansen Samaro as to where exactly is it held, and the answer in this case was a very straightforward Gwalior MP, and this is again a news that came out in December 2021. Now next one, Stand Up India scheme. So technically the question was around the repayment period, which is a max of 7 years. Now the question is that did Stand Up India scheme appear in the news in December 2021? Yes. There was a news pertaining to Stand Up India scheme, but obviously not specifically to the repayment period, but the context was more on the sense of the increase in the allocation of the scheme's portfolio to women, and I think that was the news that came out, that more women are getting allocated funds through the Stand Up India scheme. But again, once Stand Up India scheme comes into the news, automatically you're expected to know more about the scheme itself, right? That was the whole idea. Right, moving on to the next one. So the Arya Atal rankings in terms of the institutions, the top 5 institutions include the top 5 IITs, right? So it was Madras, Bombay, Delhi, Kanpur and Roorkee that were there in the top 5. So whichever option did not have one of these names, that would have been the correct answer, because I believe the question was which of these is not in the top 5, right? That was the question. Moving on to the next question. So we had another news appearing with respect to the president of FICCI. So HUL chairman Sanjeev Mehta had kind of taken over as the president of FICCI. And there was another news pertaining to the director general also at FICCI changing, and the answer there was Arun Chawla. But what we understand is The question was pertaining to the president of FICCI, and Sanjeev Mehta will be the answer to that one. Now, technically, Arun Chawla was a news that was there in the month of, I think, November or October, and Sanjeev Mehta was a news as latest as December. Right. Now, another news pertaining to November was basically the ADB approval of a $250 million loan, equivalent to basically 1873 crore rupees. Right. So this was a loan which was there to support the NICDP, which is the National Industrial Corridor Development Program of India. So obviously there have been multiple initiatives that ADB has taken in order to promote development in India. And I think the question was pertaining to a $250 million loan that was there. And the answer in this case is definitely towards the National Industrial Corridor Development Program. Right. Moving on to the next one. Again, another news that appeared in December. So the context is that the cabinet approved a digital payment incentive scheme, and there was an estimated financial outlay of approximately 1,300 crore rupees for 1 year, that is FY 2022, in order to promote your RuPay debit cards and low value Bhim UPI transactions on the P2M, that is person to merchant transactions in India. So this was again a digital payment incentive scheme that had been released in the month of December itself. Right. Another one in December. Payments bank Paytm has basically partnered with MoneyGram, which is a peer-to-peer remittance company, in order to enable international fund transfer directly into the Paytm wallet. But the biggest crux here was that all these accounts into which the money is coming, or the wallets into which the money is coming, they have to be fully KYC compliant. And that was the tie-up between Paytm and MoneyGram on this front. Another question from December. So this basically was Da Vinci Code Dan Brown. You may think that, okay, Dan Brown and Da Vinci Code happened way back in the 2000s, but that's not the case. Dan Brown was recently in the news because of a lawsuit that happened with his wife, and some settlement happening from that perspective. So Dan Brown was in the news in December, and that is why this question has basically appeared in the month of December. Right. Next one, we talk about PMC and Unity SFB. Right. So this amalgamation has been in talks for the entire year in 2021. But the point is that there have been several extensions that have been given by the RBI to PMC. The second last one was an extension of tenure till 31st of December 2021. And then again in December, they further extended the tenure for the directives to be applicable to PMC till 31st of March 2022. Again, a news that appeared in December. Now, moving on to the next news. Bibi Ka Maqbara. You may think that this is a static general knowledge. No, it is not, because there was a news pertaining to the Archaeological Society of India, which basically got ownership of the Bibi Ka Maqbara land. Right. This was a news again that came in December 2021, and hence the question on Bibi Ka Maqbara as to where it is located, and the answer is Aurangabad district of Maharashtra. Next question, talking about December 2021 again, there was a big deal that happened in the mutual fund industry, wherein your HSBC AMC basically bought out your L&T Investment Management, LTIM, from L&T Housing Finance, and this deal was worth $425 million. Again, a news that appeared in December 2021 itself. Right. Next, there was one question pertaining to the sugar marketing year, right? And there was another news in December which said that sugar marketing has commenced from 1st October and it will continue till 31st December. So that sugar marketing year essentially every year essentially is on the October to December period. That's the context on this question. Moving on to the next one again. So there has been a lot of talk in the recent months with regards to the Lok Sabha itself. So I couldn't specifically find any news item pertaining to this, but what I understand is that the question was how many sessions are there in the Lok Sabha. So there are of course 3. You have the budget, monsoon and winter sessions. If you're someone who's following politics on a, not even regular basis, but a basic level, you may obviously be aware of this already, right? Moving on to the next set of questions. Again, in September 2021, there was some news item pertaining to the PM Kisan Sampada Yojana. And the question here was that which of these is not a component. Of course, since it's a memory-based paper, we don't know exactly what were the components mentioned there, so it's difficult to comment on this question. Right, next one, December 2021, again a news pertaining to the Bharat series was definitely there, right? And how Bharat series has been adopted in the country and so on. So while the Bharat series itself was launched a little earlier, but definitely Bharat series was in the news in the month of December 2021 as well. And the format of the Bharat series is that it starts off with YY, then you have BH, then you have 4 numbers and then a couple of alphabets as well. So YY year basically stands for the year of registration of the vehicle, whereas BH stands for the code of the Bharat series. So this is as per the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Right, moving on to the next question. Another one for December 2021. Union Cabinet chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi has approved a PLI, or a production linked scheme, with an outlay of 76,000 crores. And we'd also talked about it when we said that the semiconductor industry is facing severe shortages, and that is where this outlay was required. So this is basically to boost the semiconductor and display manufacturing in India. Right. Another one for December 21. So there was another news which basically stated that Intel is planning to, set up semiconductor manufacturing units in India as the government rolls out incentives. Now, again, it's not very clear as to what the question on this one was, whether these two questions were combined and there was only one question on semiconductors, or there were two separate questions. It's difficult to say. But if these are separate questions, then of course, this one is definitely towards semiconductors, and there is Intel, which basically is planning on a semiconductor manufacturing unit in India as well. So it's difficult to say what the question was, but based on what information we have, these could be the possible statements from where the answers could be derived. Moving on to the next one. So again, the context is that this news item, because the question was on CRISIL, had appeared in October as well as December. I'll tell you the context as to why it basically came. So you're talking about the first credit rating agency of India. It was definitely CRISIL. It was established way back in 1987, right? So CRISIL was in news for two reasons, because of the people involved, right? The first one was that Amish Mehta was appointed as the new MD and CEO of the rating agency CRISIL in the month of October, and he was replacing Ashu Suyash. So this was the news in October. But in December, there was another news that Ashu Suyash has been appointed as a director at Kotak Mahindra Bank. And then, in the background of Ashu Suyash, it was told that he was a senior member and MD and CEO of CRISIL in the earlier stages. So because of Ashu Suyash, technically this news got covered in both October as well as December. And I can again say that December 2021 was the reason why CRISIL appeared in the questions. Next one, another one for December 2021. So the Niti Aayog Health Index. So top 5 performers. The first 4 are incidentally South Indian states. So where you look at Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, which are there in terms of best performers there. And this is straight from the news, right? You don't even have to look at the second statement. And then Maharashtra was in number 5. So obviously if the options were given to you, wherein which of these states is not a part of the top 5 in the health index, so any name which was outside of these names would definitely be your answer. Moving on to the next one, again December 2021. So IndusInd Bank partnered with NPCI for offering real-time cross-border remittances to India using the UPI IDs for its MTO partners, or your money transfer operator partners. Now, as a result of this, IndusInd became the first Indian bank to go live on UPI for your cross-border payments or your NRI remittances. Next, again, December 2021, SBI basically acquired a minority stake less than 50% in JSW Cement Limited for an investment of rupees 100 crore through the CCPS route. Now, the question that was asked is, what is the full form of CCPS? Simple, compulsory convertible preference shares. Straightforward question and a straightforward answer. Moving on to the next one. This news was basically part of January 2021, wherein you talk about the union budget. It is expected to come out on the 1st of February 2022, and it will happen to be Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister's 4th budget. The question was, union budget presentation on 1st February started since when? So there are two things, right? One, obviously, the earlier practice used to be that the budget would basically be in the last week of February, and it would be at 5 p.m. So then first thing that got changed was it was changed from 5 p.m. to 11 a.m. And the other thing that got changed was instead of the end of February, we became to the 1st of February, so that all the, analysis and planning with regards to the finances of the country happen much before the closing of the financial year. That was a thought process, and this proposal basically came out in 2016, and we officially went live with this in 2017. That was the context on this one. Right, the next question, again December 2021. So which is the point of sale machine wise second largest bank? So the answer in this case happens to be Axis Bank. The leader is HDFC, followed by SBI as well, but number 2 in this is Axis Bank, and this was specifically in the news again in December 2021. Right, looking at the next one on December 2021, the largest telescope, so basically considered as a successor to the Hubble's telescope. So the James Webb Space Telescope was basically brought in, and the telescope is basically on a 30-day long journey to cover 1.5 million kilometers distance between the Earth and its intended orbit. Now, what is unclear is whether the question was pertaining to the distance between its intended orbit and the Earth, or was it basically regarding the wavelength range, right? So we are not sure as to what that question pertains to be. If it is the wavelength range, then it is basically 0.6 to 28.5 microns. If it is the distance between the Earth and its intended orbit, that is 1.5 million kilometers. That is the context on this one. Again, a news that happened in December 2021. Moving on to the next set of questions. In October 2021, there was another news pertaining to the global payments tech major Visa in partnership with JustPay, and it basically launched India's first card-on-file tokenization services for your e-commerce players such as Grofers, Big Basket, and Make My Trip. Now, what is unclear here is what exactly did the question ask? Was it asking about a tie-up between Big Basket and Make My Trip, or was it talking about some other tokenization service on a card-on-file perspective? Now, if it was purely a card-on-file tokenization perspective, which is useful for e-commerce players like Big Basket, Make My Trip and Grofers, then the answer in this case is a Visa in partnership with JustPay. There are some talks also with regards to question pertaining to JioMart, but we are unclear as to what that question is. So I would not want to comment on that at this stage. Moving on to the next one, another December 2021. This is again a straight lift from the second line of the report itself. So it says that the report on trend and progress of banking in India 2020-2021. This was again a report that was released by the RBI in the month of December, which is basically a statutory publication in compliance with which section of the Banking Regulation Act, and the section is 36(2). It's very clear in the Banking Regulation Act also when you refer to 36(2), it says that this section gives the powers to the Reserve Bank of India to publish various kinds of reports and policies which can basically be adhered to by all the regulated entities. So that is what section 36(2) in the Banking Regulation Act talks about. Moving on to another question. Now it's a little confusing here because when you talk about Union Bank of India's ranking, it is unclear as to what kind of ranking are you talking about, right? So it could be a ranking based on market cap. It could be a ranking based on the recently released results of the ease index, or it could be a ranking on in terms of the overall size itself, right? There are three possible answers here. So if you go by the market cap, and if you look at the latest market cap, obviously, which is basically the number of shares outstanding of a particular company multiplied by its price in the market. So SBI leads the charts with BOB, PNB, Canara, IOB ahead of Union Bank. So in that case, Union Bank becomes 6th. But if you look at Union Bank of India's rank as far as the size of the assets is concerned, it is the 5th largest bank in the country post the amalgamation that happened in 2020, right? So that is the context on Union Bank. 5th largest in terms of size, 6th largest in terms of market cap, and if you talk about the ease index, then the ranking is 3rd. So obviously 3 different rankings possible, depends on what question was asked. Right, next we're talking about H1 visa authority. If it was straight H1 visa, then obviously the answer is United States. If it was the issuance authority, then the answer obviously will be USCIS, which is the Citizenship and Immigration Service of the United States. Right, so moving on to the next question, again another December 2021 news. So it was around the nuclear capacity increase. Now we are unsure whether it was asking about the future or the past, but we anyway have the data available in the month of December itself, wherein India's present nuclear capacity stands at 6780 megawatts, and this is planned to increase to 22,480 megawatts by 2031. And if you look at the installed nuclear power capacity, from where it has come to 6780 megawatts, so that is basically 4780 megawatts over the last 7 years, over a 40% increase on that perspective, right? So these are both the numbers given to you in the same statement. So not sure whether it was talking about the future or whether it was talking about the past, but this is where the answer comes from. Moving on to the next question, another December 2021 news. So basically talking about not exactly a co-lending partnership, but it was talking about the State Bank of India and Union Bank of India as part of the same news, and what kind of an auction methodology did they use for the loans that they had disbursed to KSK Mahanadi Power, or let's say such similar entities, right? So context was which kind of a loan methodology or auction methodology did SBI and Union Bank of India use? So the answer in this case happens to be a Swiss challenge auction, wherein obviously you have the bidding is basically open to one particular bidder, and whatever quotation the bidder gives, what happens is subsequently aapka the quotation is then open to all the bidders, and they start bidding in the process. And once the entire bidding process is over, the first bidder again gets an opportunity to match the bid or the quotation by the other bidders, right? So that is the benefit that the first bidder gets, and wo bhi tabhi aayega when other bidders have actually quoted less than the original bidder. Obviously, if the first quotation of the original bidder itself is the lowest, then there is no need for them to match off the bid. So that's the context on the Swiss challenge auction, right? So moving on to the next one, again December 2021 fir se State Bank of India was celebrating its centenary year in the UK with the launch of the Namaste UK account. Obviously this is for people who are looking at settling down in the UK on a long-term perspective, and even before they reach there, they can open their UK account with SBI, right? There was another news pertaining to September 2021. So basically, again, there have been several initiatives that have been taken by the Development Finance Corporation of the US along with US aid, right? And several such projects are there. Now the question is, I think from the question's perspective, there was something pertaining to COVID-19 mentioned in the question. So if that was the case, then basically you're looking at a credit guarantee of $55 million, approximately equal to 400 crore rupees in terms of the Indian COVID response program for agriculture transition, and this was basically to address the economic impact of COVID-19 in India. So that was the news that appeared in September 2021. Next up, we're talking about another development from a December 2021 perspective, wherein I think it was talked about Amundi Asset Management Company and SBI. They both of them in separate announcements came out and said that they will be looking to sell their stake in SBI Funds Management through an IPO that will happen. Now, technically, SBI and Amundi Asset Management are currently stakeholders in this entity called Funds Management of SBI. Right, so that was the news again that appeared in December 2021. Not sure if this question was there, but definitely I thought of adding it here because it was in circulation in some of the discussion forums. Right, so another question in December 2021. So talked about NSE Prime. Again, so if you're part of an NSE Prime listing, then obviously you need to have higher corporate standards that need to be followed. So NSE Prime company needs at least 40% public shareholding as against 25% under the SEBI rules. So if you want to be listed on NSE Prime, you need to have at least 40% public shareholding. That's the news item. Right, moving on to the next question. So in again October 2021, Kotak Mahindra Bank partnered with NPCI to launch Kotak credit cards on the RuPay network, and these were named as Veer, and they were for the Indian Armed Forces. Next question, again December 2021. So basically, People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, announced their Person of the Year as Alia Bhatt for her contribution in terms of supporting the animal-friendly fashion industry and her advocacy for dogs and cats in need as well. So again, this was PETA, and Alia Bhatt was the answer in this case. Moving on to the next question. So basically talking about the Delimiting Commission of J&K. Now the question is not very clear whether it was talking about who is the chairperson or whether it was about the assembly seats. So anyway, this statement covers both. So it was basically under the chairpersonship of Justice retired Ranjana Prakash Desai. And there was a proposal to add 6 assembly seats for Jammu and 1 for Kashmir, so total 7 in all. That's the context on this one. Right, so another news pertaining to December 2021. So talking about another news around Development Finance Corporation, which basically approved a $500 million debt financing for First Solar's manufacturing facility in Tamil Nadu. And this was basically towards the manufacture of a photovoltaic setup, right, from a solar perspective. And this was the project on DFC for First Solar in Tamil Nadu for photovoltaic solar development, right? That was again in the news. Now talking about another news that came out in January 2021. So talking about the book built issues, which were going to open on or after 1st of April 2022 in the context of the IPO, SEBI said that 1/3 of the portion available to your non-institutional investors will be reserved for the applications or the applicants with an application size of more than 2 lakh and up to 10 lakh. And the remaining 2/3 of the portion available to your non-institutional investors will be reserved for applicants with an application size of more than 10 lakhs. So that is the context on which this was there. Not exactly clear as to what was the news specifically or the question specifically, but I guess this statement should kind of address the news and the answer overall. Right, so there was another question pertaining to February 2021 in terms of the banking committee that was set up in 2014. Now the question that comes up here is that when you talk about this, there were 2 possible good committees that came up during that period. And the reason I'm confused here is because one, there was a news in again December 2021 pertaining to a white paper discussion that was circulated by the Niti Aayog, and this was pertaining to the digital banks, and it was talking about a proposal for licensing and regulatory regime for India, and it referred to the Nachiket Moore committee report, which was an important milestone towards financial inclusion in the mission mode. On the other hand, there was another news that appeared in February 2021, which basically talked about a very important committee report that came out in 2014, which was the review of the governance of boards of banks in India. And that was basically the PJ Nayak committee, and that was in the news in February 2021. So not sure as to which particular committee was referred to. What I understand is it in all probability was the PJ Nayak committee. But if again more clarity can be brought in if we understand what exactly the question was, right? So that is on the banking committee news item as well. Now, if you look at the analysis of this, a whopping massive chunk has basically appeared from December 2021. I would say reasonable participation to some extent from October and September 2021 as well, right? And if you look at it, I think Jan also had a couple of questions coming in. But the point is, this particular exam kind of gives you a trend that if you basically looked at the last 3 to 4 months, then it was kind of done overall. That was the whole context that the trend was. So again, a bit on the moderate to the tough side overall, because these questions were not very straightforward. Having said that, if you had read that news item, you would have definitely been able to answer the questions if you had looked at it from a curiosity standpoint to try and understand a bit more, right? So that is what I have in store for today. Right, so that brings us to the end of this particular session, wherein we discuss the IBPS PO mains paper from the perspective of general banking and financial awareness. Of course, one of the key trends that comes out is that news has to be read in depth. You have to bring in greater amount of curiosity towards your understanding of news, and rather than just looking at one-liner. So that is something which has been a standout from this particular paper itself. Again, moderate to tough in terms of difficulty level, and anywhere between let's say 15 to 20 is a decent set of attempts in terms of number of questions with a reasonable amount of accuracy, right? So that is what I had in store for this particular session. Of course, we will be interacting subsequently as well with some other agenda in the subsequent sessions, but until the next session, this is Ravi signing off. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend ahead. See you guys.